My guest today to talk about identity politics is Parker Malloy, a writer at Upworthy who's also contributed to Rolling Stone, Huffington Post, Salon, and The Advocate. She's a frequent and incisive contributor also to that sprawling collaborative magazine known as Twitter. Welcome, Parker.
It's really good to be here. Thanks for having me on.
So I want to just blunder right into a delicate matter, which is the question of, did the LGBTQ conversations during the election and on the left cost Hillary the election?
No. In a word, no. One thing that I find kind of interesting about the conversation that, we saw in the wake of the election, there were these editorials that were popping up in, New York Times and, other places that were talking about how we need to abandon identity politics and we need to abandon social issues and these things as though these are, small boutique type issues. But the truth is that, LGBT issues weren't really discussed a lot during the campaign. I mean, it's not as though Hillary Clinton went out and did an hour-long rally where she talked about nothing but bathrooms. Like, that didn't happen. She went out and she talked about jobs and she ran ads talking about these things. And maybe the issue was focusing too much on Trump as a destructive force on his own, and not on her policy positions. But I don't think there's any real evidence that it had anything to do with, talking about LGBT issues or race.
Or identity politics, simply identity politics. So, but this is clearly a case made, the way that you see the case made by Trumpites is, as someone said on my Facebook page, better Trump bring nuclear winter than that we get more initials in LGBTQ. And I just thought, really, well, I hope that it is a great relief and comfort to you that the initials seem to be capped at 5 or 4 in LGBTQ, because I don't know how that's going to help in the bomb shelter, but it must mean something. Certainly, Trumpites were furious and love to evoke as part of their snowflake rhetoric this absolute contempt for identity politics, especially around not race so much as sexuality and gender.
I think the issue is that those are people whose votes you're not, Hillary Clinton had no chance of getting anyway, unless the Democratic Party completely abandoned, trans issues and, gay rights and stuff like that, unless they completely threw these issues under the bus or just reduced it down to nothing but talking points. I'm picturing Trump holding a ridiculous, flag that had the Sharpie writing LGBTs for Trump, where it's like, it doesn't mean anything, but it's just kind of like hey, look, I acknowledged you. There were so many those posts where it was like during Trump's acceptance speech at the convention when he said LGBTQ, he kind of stumbled on that, but there were posts that came out in the days that followed that were asking essentially, okay, well, hey, he acknowledged you. Isn't that good enough? No.
Yeah.
As we can see from the actions that he's actually taking as president, no, simply saying something doesn't actually equal policy that helps us. But you can't, I don't think that the right path for the Democratic Party or for progressives is to abandon these issues that get lumped into identity politics, because so many of them have, an impact that goes far beyond just that group, being able to use the bathroom or something. We talk about trans people having protections that allow them to use the bathroom as being a big controversial thing. And it might seem kind of ridiculous. You look at this and you go, oh, it's just a bathroom. Isn't it kind of absurd that we're focusing on bathrooms all this much? Yes, it is. But the reason that it's absurd is that when you tell trans people that they might be arrested for walking into a bathroom, or that they might be denied access to any bathroom, or fired for being trans, or denied housing for being trans, you're not just telling them they can't use the bathroom. You're telling them that they are not welcome in society as a whole. So while it looks like a boutique issue, while it looks like a small issue that doesn't matter, the Democrats are doing what they can. They're doing the bare minimum, which is good. I think if we take a step back on that and say, hey, who are we to say that we should, fight for the rights of this group or that group, then we're caving to the center, which I find really interesting when we look at the conversation happening on the left. There's a push from people on the left who are saying abandon identity politics, focus on economic issues. Well, these are all economic issues. Gender is an economic issue. Abortion is an economic issue. We can't really pick and choose if we want to move left. I tried this a while back when the Republicans were pushing the American Health Care Act. I went to Hillary Clinton's campaign website, which is still up, and I took all the information that she put under healthcare reform, and I was like, these are some good ideas that we should push for now. And I saw people from across, Bernie supporters, Hillary supporters, like retweeting it, saying, yeah, this is a great idea. And then I followed that up by saying, you don't really want to know where I got this from, and then I eventually shared it, but there are sort of these blinders that go on there. And when people actually read the policies that Hillary Clinton was putting out there, not what she said 10 years ago or 20 years ago, and not, what you think she might do, but what she actually ran on, it was a progressive platform. It wasn't perfect by any means, but the policy was fine. The salesmanship, that is what might have been off. And you could say, well, she should have gone to Wisconsin. Sure, that's different. That's fine. But when it comes to saying that the solution, based on no evidence, is to try to push these smaller groups of people, trans people or gay people, to try to push them out of the conversation completely, I find that to be disingenuous because it's not based on any data. In North Carolina, the sole reason that their governor lost really comes down to the fact that, he pushed this really awful anti-trans, anti-LGBT law, and he supported it. And people of North Carolina were saying that's not cool. And now after the election, they wound up replacing it with something that's almost just as bad. But still, the point is that was the one state where identity politics, specifically LGBTQ identity politics, were front and center, and the Republican candidate lost. So, and the Democratic candidate ran on repealing that bill. So, I mean, this is one of those things where I don't see how that translates. That's a state that Trump won. I don't see how this feeds a larger narrative that identity politics are somehow poisonous.
I mean, I think that two sort of interesting issues are at play here. One of those reminds me of Hillary's major epigram, which is that women's rights are human rights, which, on the face of it doesn't sound that exciting. But of course, trans economics are economics. LGBTQ economics are economics every bit as the slightly arcane, frankly, economics of coal miners. So it might be that the identity politics belongs to, or the more precise issues belong to the other side. And in Wisconsin, they might have needed some attention. But to say on the left for the Bernie Sanders types that these are like, to universalize from the experience of a very regional experience of Wisconsin, unemployed man, that might have worked in the labor movement during the labor movement, but it doesn't, as you say, work now. So that's the first one. The second one that interests me, and we need to wrap up, but the second one is that the bathroom issue is also in a weird way contextualized by the right, that there's sort of a nice shock factor in finding the thing that will make you most squeamish. I remember when Geraldine Ferraro was running with Walter Mondale as his vice presidential candidate, and there was a long conversation about what would happen if she was a heartbeat away from the pregnancy, and she went, quote, on the rag wouldn't she bomb Russia because she got her period? And there was so much worry about that. Of course, now we have a male president who seems to be consistently on the rag. I really worry about his hormonal fluctuations vis-a-vis nuclear war. But that conversation was the one that somehow got people involved. And the bathroom thing has always been this kind of red herring and proxy just for ordinary homophobia.
Yeah. And yeah, exactly. I mean, that's an argument that goes back decades. You know, the argument that, you know, there were these old PSAs that were just like, stay away from, you know, bathrooms. Gay people go in there and they'll attack your child. And that's why we need to discriminate against gay people. And that was horrible and terrible. And now that argument has been brought to, you know, specifically target trans people. And the real issue is, it was after the Supreme Court's decision about marriage equality that a lot of the groups that had been focusing so much on fighting marriage equality realized that that is not a fight they can win anymore. So they turned their focus to bathrooms. That's why you have organizations like the National Organization for Marriage and, you know, a lot of these other right-wing groups that had been previously fighting to restrict marriage issues. They've recently taken aim at trans issues specifically and attacking trans people and fighting back that way. So, I mean, that's why there's been all this issue. It's not that Democrats have been pushing this, you know, pushing things as fast as many trans people would like them to. It's that Republicans have taken this action and started an all-out assault on trans rights to where Democrats then have to decide whether they want to stand up for them or not. So they're being put in a defensive position, and the only option is to let Republicans just trample trans people, you know, or to stand up for them and then get accused of, you know, prioritizing identity politics over anything else.